Our first guest is an Emmy-winning actor who you've seen on CBC's Street Legal reboot and most recently in the horror series Slasher on Netflix. Now, Joanne Vannicola, welcome to What She Said.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Now, you just released a memoir called All We Knew But Couldn't Say, and it's about the years it took you to reconcile your queer, non-binary identity with the demands of a deeply closeted industry. Mm-hmm. But first of all, can you help us and our viewers learn how to use the correct pronouns? Because properly we should be using they, them, their, and themselves, and that can be confusing.
I think it is. I think particularly, for people above the age of 20, I think it's a little bit harder when you think about language because there's plural and singular, and I think people are so, set in their ways in terms of how they've learned language. But I think when you separate language from people's lives and, transgender people and non-binary people, there's a specific reality around gender and not fitting into the binary, and that would be, feminine here and masculine here. That is the binary, and they're both kind of extremes on the spectrum of gender when you think of non-binary and transgender people, androgynous people, and so I never fit in, for example, in a sort of classically female, stereotypical, feminine expression of gender. And it was so hard for me my entire life to explain what that was, because people would say, well, just because you're a lesbian doesn't mean that you can't be feminine. And I would say, but
a lipstick lesbian, isn't that
one of the terms? It was one of the terms. But it was hard to describe because I didn't have the language when I was growing up. And if I'd had the word non-binary, I would have been able to say, but I'm non-binary. I'm not really feminine, and I don't want to wear dresses. I don't want to wear a bunch of makeup. I don't want to grow my hair and wear high heels. I'm not that person. And it's very, very different. Sexuality is very different from expression of gender. And I think it became the language of choice for non-binary people to start using they, them, even Z.
but in grammar, they, them indicates a plurality.
I understand.
And so if you were reading a book and you weren't seeing a movie, let's say, you would assume there would be more than one. So is it not a question of needing another word?
I don't think
because
so.
I find that very confusing. Because
it can be.
It's the word they, them, is meant to express something, and what you're trying to express is something else.
But I think it's just training the brain. I think it's training the brain. It really is training the brain, because I know that seems like a difficult thing, but there are people that I know who have trained their brains and they're so good at it. They're even better than I am at it. And these are like straight binary people. And I'm like, they use they, them, Z, and they find a way to do it, and they've trained their brains. There are a lot of other words, but we'll just stop there.
Okay, we'll stop there. Now, you have spent years as an advocate for child abuse survivors, LGBTQ2 plus rights, and representation in the film and television industry. Tell us what it was that moved you to write this book.
Well, it's a big journey, the book. It starts in my childhood years, and it's about growing up in a violent home with two abusive parents. And I had older siblings. So I had three older siblings. One of them was a boy, and he didn't really experience the same abuse at home. He was sort of, the male in a very traditional Italian family, and he didn't understand, the half of it that the girls went through. And I saw my elder sisters go through so much violence and so much emotional degradation, and it kind of trickled down to me. But I sort of grew up in a climate of fear and sort of not knowing when you'd be beaten or if, what might happen. So it was very, very difficult. But as the baby and the last born, my mother put a lot of energy into me, and that energy was about being a star. So there was all the lessons and the acting, and it became like the best form of escapism for me.
I was going to say,
yeah, exactly.
So it was brilliant, really, in the end. But it was about navigating that childhood, surviving it, getting away from it, and learning then how to function in the world, because I left home when I was about 14 going on 15. My mother wanted me to leave. And it was mutual. And so that was that. I went to another city and
what did you do at 14, 15?
I went to a high school. I lived with a roommate. And then suddenly I was living in the adult world, taking care of myself and not knowing how. And trying to survive.
And then you're in the entertainment industry.
Correct.
How were you referred to it in the industry as the deeply closeted industry. So has anything changed in this time?
I do think it's changed. I think it's still deeply closeted. I spoke to a young actor recently who wasn't sent out for a part that was asking for a gay character. It's a gay audition, and he didn't go in because he wasn't selected by the people in positions of power because they didn't want him to play a gay part. They didn't want it to stereotype his career. So there's a lot of insidious and homophobic kind of things that happen every day in the film industry that one would never hear about necessarily unless you're really plugged in. And, I'm an advocate, and I started the LGBTQ committee at the union. So a lot of people now talk to me about what it is.
So let me ask you a question, because we've heard recently a lot of people saying, well, that person isn't gay, or why is a straight person playing them? And then the response is, it's acting. Everybody should be up for the part. How do you feel about that?
So it took me a long time to really think that through. It wasn't an easy conclusion, and I don't know that I have a full conclusion, but I feel like because things are changing so rapidly in the culture, and because there's really a big power difference between heterosexual actors and queer actors. Usually it's heterosexual actors that actually get to play anything. It's acting. But when it comes to queer actors, we are not. It's everything. You can do everything. Unless you're very closeted or you can pass as straight, or you're not out. And that happens for many, many queer actors. They're afraid to be out because then they will be stereotyped, and then they will not get to go for the same roles that the heterosexual people audition for all the time. So it's not a two-way street. It's not equal. And until it's equal, I think that queer people and LGBTQ people should be playing LGBTQ characters because there's very little out there for LGBTQ actors. But it's going to take some time, I think, for human rights and equity and storytelling that's across the board to equal out.
So what do you hope people take from this book, and who do you think should read it? I know you're going to say everyone should read it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you break it down, I think survivors of abuse, I think women, feminists, LGBTQ people who are in the film business, maybe even young adults who, there's a lot of information in there about depression and probably mental health, I guess, because as a teen, I had a lot of struggles dealing with the memories of my childhood. And
I bet.
Yeah, and I ended up having this eating disorder, which was compounded by being in the film industry and them wanting me to look a certain way as a girl and to hide my sexuality. All those things really impacted the way I thought about myself. I saw myself. And so I think, yes, anybody could read it, but I think there are specific people that it might help more than others, and they might see reflections of themselves. And
it's really quite astonishing. I mean, from what you endured as a child with so little support and sort of healthy framework, if you will, that you are where you are today.
Yeah, well, I did get a lot of help. I went to therapy. I talked to people. I had, advice here and there. And sometimes it just took a little sentence or a phrase or one book or one person to kind of just say something that tweaked. And it didn't have to be a big relationship. It could just be a passing moment. And it was like, oh, I've got to remember that.
Now, you're going to be a part of the Word on the Street Book and Magazine Festival in Toronto this September, the 30th anniversary. So tell us what you're going to be doing there.
I don't know the entirety of my role there, but I do know that I'm sort of featured with some other authors or new authors on the 22nd of September, part of a panel and workshop, possibly discussions. I'm also with the Diaspora Dialogues program on the 21st, which is separate from the event on the 22nd.
Awesome. So where can people connect with you online and get a copy of the book?
Well, the book is available in many small stores across the, in North America and in Europe. You can also get it online at the big stores, Indigo,
Perfect.
Amazon, or small stores like Glad Day or Another Story or McNally's. Kohl's.
And you have a website?
I do. It's I have two websites. One is JoanneVannicola.com and one is JoanneVannicolaAuthor.com, which is specifically to the memoir All We Knew But Couldn't Say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having
sharing
me.
Your story.
Yeah,
Best
thank you.
of luck.
Thank you so much.